degrees. It doesn't sound that cold, but in the UK, I'd just like to say, yeah, I've had a few comments from some guys overseas in America. So for everybody in America watching this, thanks very much. And yeah, hello, how are you doing over there? Good luck with the the new president. So yeah, in the UK here, so it's kind of like, I think it's like the 10th of November or something. When it's cold, it gets really, really cold. It feels colder. The chill factor here is different, I think. So yeah, it's 5 degrees. It sounds all right, but it feels really, really cold. I got up this morning, you could really, really feel the difference. So I'm assuming that's going to affect the plaster as it did in yesterday's episode. So we're just sitting here waiting for Shay. Give you a brief update of what we're up to today. It's going to be plastering over blue grit part 2, and we will get there shortly in Camberley, just up the road, about half hour. I'm going to go and get a coffee and we'll see you at the job. Okay, so here we are. It's the second day of the job entitled plastering over blue grit. We did part 1 yesterday, and in part 1 I did declare that going over blue grit is not my favourite thing to do at all. Now, so we come on the second day. So yesterday we got this wall on, we got this ceiling on, and we got this little bit here, and got some reveals on, and there was loads of chasers and stuff in here. So do have a look at the previous video, it'll be the one directly underneath this. But we had something similar to that going on. And they blue gritted inside the chases onto the brickwork where it had gone bare. Then we got painted surfaces, and the idea of it was to kind of balance out all of the suction of everything. So that's kind of what blue grit does. You have to put it on, I believe, at least 24 hours prior to plastering. So this is a painted surface, and he's got his lad to do it. Now, as you notice, and this wall was the same, he's had trouble with the roller, and we've got areas with like hardly any grit and areas with a massive build-up of grit. So that has given that painted surface a texture that wasn't there originally. Now I tend to use PVA quite a bit because I just like the versatility of it. We're using it now, and what we had to do is, because the walls were so bad, we had to bond out. We had some bonding, we mixed some bonding with some multi-finish. We filled the chases, then we gave a lot of these walls a real tight coat of bonding with large 20-inch trowels to try and straighten them up a little bit. That was a particularly tricky area up there. Now, because we've done that yesterday, now we're back to the position where we've got uneven suction again. So that's bare bonding, okay, done yesterday. So that's really going to pull the moisture out of the multi-finish. And that was blue, that's a painted surface with blue grit on it. So there's going to be literally no suction on that at all. So although initially we had all the suction was regulated, now we've had to pull it apart because, you know. So what we're going to have to do is get the PVA out and PVA all this bonding up. Now if you've got blue grit, we can't blue grit that now and then plaster straight over it. You're not supposed to do that. It won't. And I think what it is the blue grit does need time, because it's so thick, to go into the surface as best as it can, and it needs to cure, because if you plaster over it when it's really wet, it will stay wet like it would do in the tin, and it will probably take days for it to dry out. So that's where blue grit is kind of impractical. So, you know, what's the point of having 2 products around? We could have done this all with PVA and not blue gritted anything. We could have just PVA'd it the day before. We could be PVA'ing it now, and all we've got on the job is PVA. It is the kitchen. PVA is good enough, really. It's interior. The only time I'll use grits or anything like that is sometimes if there's an issue with exterior adhesion, because it's so messy as well, it gets everywhere. Yeah, as you can tell, it's not my favourite stuff, but the builder got it done, and he's got his lad to do the gritting, so we're having to deal with it, and that's what we're going to do today. And today again, the temperature is down. Yesterday we noticed that the ceiling took forever to go off. Over it, that was over just fresh plasterboard. This was over a gritted painted surface. So I'm going to dare say that we will be able to get all of this stuff on So this wall, and this wall, we've still got to bead up these reveals here, and we'll have it all on live. Because when it's cold and when it's thick and textured like this, what we're going to do is we're going to get that first coat on, and we're going to give that first coat extra time to pick up so it can hold itself together. Because what's going to happen is when we're going to go over it, because it's got the texture, we're going to go on so thick, there's no suction in places, it's really going to sag, and just the texture's going to bleed through the surface. So if you put that first coat on and you got that, and it's still soaking wet, and you go over it again with a second coat, that texture, that bleed through is going to happen again. So that's what we're going to do. I mean, I entitled this video that it's plastering for beginners, but if you're a beginner and you're faced with something like this, I'd probably suggest that you don't do it. You're probably better off starting on something else, because if you have no idea what you're doing and you try to tackle something like this on your own, then you'll probably be mentally scarred for life and never attempt plastering again. So what we need to do is set ourselves up to be okay. So what we're going to do is when we do knock up the one finish, we're going to knock it up quite a bit stiffer than what we normally would, and we're going to leave that first coat quite a bit longer and maybe give it 2 flattens, because it's really important to get things in shape right from the outset. It makes the laying down coat so much easier. So enough of me waffling on. Let's get this all PVA'd and try and balance up this suction again, and we'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so just as I'm PVAing up this section here, here's another little note. So we've put this bead up, I've stapled it up, and we've used the larger trowels to straighten this up as best we could with bonding, because it was all bent and all over the place. Now if you notice here, the bead is sitting quite flush onto this bonded surface. As we cast our eye down, see it's coming away there now. It's hard to get the camera in there. You see we've got all this area here. Now what we've done here is use the actual rigidness of this bead to show us where that is. You might be tempted when you're putting that bead up to think, oh, that's off the wall a little bit there, and get a nail in or a staple or something and bang it in flush, and that should curl the bead around it. So no, we're not doing that. We're using the bead to show us if it's straight or not. We can get underneath it, you can see it does look straight. So if we was hammering that in there, that last bit of bead down here would curl in and you'd see it. So yeah, there's a bit of depth there, but multi-finish can take it. Now, if you recall from yesterday's video, we did something up here on this head that needed to be done. See this line here? We left that in on purpose. It's a little bit of residue from the back of the trowel, because this bit of head here is curling round this way, like that. So when I was doing this ceiling yesterday, look, you can see that the back of the trowel is flush with the bonding, and so is the front of the trowel. Now this is a 20-inch trowel, and when it's showing us, look, this deficit here, right there. Okay, so when I've come out and troweled, it's created this little line here, which we're going to use as a datum for when I come and do this, and that should keep that square. So if I come down a little bit, hopefully, so you can see the gap in it. We'll come up to that line, that'll be straight. So even there, we can just come up, hit our trowel, hit that little ridge, like so, and that should bring us down flush and take this curve out that's occurring up there. Yeah, it's curling right round in there, let's see. Stapler. 10mm staples on this bonded surface. It does go through the bead. It's a much tighter grip than going through the hole. And you can see that the bead is able to move there. It can't. Staples in the holes, movement. No movement. if you are having trouble with staples and you've gone in the holes because it's not going through the bead, then you can back it up with scrim. Now scrim here will hold the bead really quite surprisingly securely if you have got movement, especially if you get it on both sides. But the problem we've got here is, look, the scrim is going to stick to this plasterboard, but it's not, even though this bonding here has been PVA'd, it's not going to enjoy being stuck to that very well. So you can back that scrim up with staples. It's so tight there that it's hitting the concrete, it's having trouble. Just hammer them flat. So that is one way to put up beads. I quite like doing it like this if you can, because it's quick, it's dry, it's up, you can get them done in no time without knocking up any gear. Alternatively, you can stick them up with a little bit of stiff multi, and then you obviously load the corner up, stick the bead on, the multi comes out, bleeds through, and then you brush it back with a wet brush to make sure that you've got nothing coming over the top of this line here. Or alternatively, if the surface allows you to do it, you can just get some short drywalls or clout nails, and they'll tend to hold the bead quite well as well. But it's whatever you want to do. I've just got the stapler. If I can, I always get them up like this, and a little bit of scrim certainly doesn't hurt, and it reinforces the corner quite well. Okay, one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, when you're sticking up beads such as these, is to get where they join up really good. Get a really good fix right close to the end. And quite often you're better off leaving the end until you've got both sides up, and then you can manipulate them and make them go exactly where they need to be. Because if there's any ridge or anything there, that makes it really difficult to plaster, because your trowel will come on and it'll go over the ridge and it'll cause a little line coming through the wall of the plaster. So this is really important, to get this as straight as you can and in line with each other. Now, one little trick I like to do, because I very rarely use a measuring tape, but I've cut this just slightly. Do you want to have a look?
We can see it's slightly too long centimetre.
Yeah, when you zoom in and right and cut it. So look, we're just over. So I'm basing the bottom of the bead on here, okay? And then with my eye, I'm just taking the snips and I'm cutting it in so tight that if you have a tape measure, there's much more chance of error, because you might measure it slightly wrong and then you've got to cut it up with the tape measure. So by doing things by eye like that, you should see it. Now, if you notice as well, look, I haven't fixed this one in perfectly because there's an undulation in the wall, so I need to pull this one out a little bit to meet it. Okay, now I'm going to get a fix in both of those so that they fit perfectly like that, with no ridge on this little corner at all. So that is another reason why I quite like using staples for things like that, because they're not that permanent. And if you didn't have the foresight to get the first bead up as it should be, because there's an undulation, you haven't got the next bead up just yet, and you didn't realise there's going to be a discrepancy there, then if you'd put clout nails up or something like that, then you're going to have much more trouble trying to get those nails out and readjust that bead. With staples, you've got a chance of getting them out and readjusting it with a lot more ease and without damaging the bead quite so much. Okay, so it looks like we're kind of like ready in a position to actually knock up some plaster and put some on the walls. Now, let's just have a double little check here. So we've got this little back wall on. We've got this one here, which is quite large and undulated as well. It's all over the place, inconsistent suctions. We need to do something to the bottom of this wall because it didn't go in very well yesterday, and we need to get this wall on. Now, remember, I'm expecting this to be all quite low suction, so what we're going to do is, instead of knock up a massive amount and then run around trying to chase it, what we're going to do is I'm going to start here, and I'm going to start getting this corner done, because this is going to be quite a tricky corner to get on this bit here. So this needs plastering, that needs plastering. So if I start here, and I start bringing this down, I'm going to get enough to get this wall on, and maybe this half, the bottom wall here that Shay did yesterday. There's a few ripples in there we're not happy with, so we're going to go over it. And then we're going to see how we're doing, and then quite possibly we're going to knock up some more, and then put this area on, Okay, so we're going to break it down into two halves, and what might happen then, because we don't know exactly how it's going to go yet, so rather than knock up a massive amount and get it all on and think, oh, that bonding is really pulling in, we need to get back and chasing it around, you start getting under stress, and you don't want a stressful environment, at least I don't anyway. So by breaking this first coat down, we'll get this on, then we'll reevaluate and think, shall we push forward or shall we sit back? I'm guessing we're going to be able to push forward, but because we're doing it in 2 gauges, we'll be able to move around the room as it's setting and get it all nice and flat, because remember we're going to have to leave this first coat to pick up quite a bit because the walls are in such a bad condition, it's really textured, so we need them to pick up, maybe give it 2 flattens, and then we'll have another little re-evaluation and we'll decide then whether we can lay the whole amount down in 1 gauge or if we need to break up that second coat as well into 2 bits to give us a little bit more time to get around the room. So time will tell what we do exactly. So, you know, it's the same with a lot of things really, with plastering, it's never an exact science. You know, sometimes you've got to, you know, have a general plan of what you're going to do, but be ready to change on the flip of a coin, okay? Anything can happen in here just yet. So, yeah, that's what we're going to look at doing. That's the way I think it's going to go, but it might be completely different. Who knows? Let's find out now. Okay, look, so the plan has changed already. Shane knocked up an awkward amount on the first one. I'll get that little bit, Shane, don't worry about it. I'll come in, I'll get a small tool in there. You want to start on the main body over here. So what we had, Shane had to sort out this half wall here, so he knocked up for that. And then when I was looking out, I thought we've probably got enough to start on this wall here. So that's what we've done, flatten that in. And also we had enough to get these reveals on. And there was a bit left over, and that up there was quite nasty. So all this stuff here was from this gauge, and Shay's going over it now because that was all quite undulated. So taking the time with a large trowel to straighten that up. So essentially that little bit there is going to get 3 coats. And also if you remember from earlier, I was on about this bead up here. This head was curling round, so I've taken the time to start getting this and bringing this out to the level that's required for that to be straight. Shay's just knocked up again, so we've knocked up enough in there, hopefully, to get all this wall on. And then we'll have a look back, see what's left in there, and decide whether to knock it back or start dubbing out some beads around here or something like that. So, yeah, time for this wall to get on. First gauge, all those little bits. This is our second gauge we've knocked up. So look, I did get this pipe trowel out to come down this edge. Because I thought that door had been on there for years, but I thought, just know what, if I could get this door off. So I had a little look and I was expecting these hinges to have been painted in with slotted screwdrivers and be virtually impossible to get out. But to my surprise, it was only tacked up there temporarily with some nice new screws. So that door's been off recently and been put back on quickly. So by taking this door off and removing these hinges, really makes this so much easier. And considering it's so undulated with the grit on there and everything, making that as easy as possible is a really good idea. Okay, so now's the time to kind of re-evaluate what's going on. So this is our second coat, our first coat on this second wall. So now we've got that on. Just coming back to this first wall that we put on, there's some pattern in there and it's still wet in places and it's starting to pick up a little bit in places. I'm thinking that we might drop back and flatten this in now and keep an eye on this wall to see how fast it's picking up, because remember there was that bonded area in there. We might lay this all down before we start thinking about putting a second coat on this wall. And the only reason I'm a little bit concerned about doing this wall is because the majority of it does have a bonding coat on it. Even though we've given it 2 coats of PVA this morning, I'm feeling if we push forward, then we might get caught out by this one trying to get in front of these wetter walls with the blue grit on it. So we kind of left it to last. So if this does not go on right now, it's not the end of the world, because I think it's going to put in with that bonding. So the only area that's a bit of an issue and has any real visible blue grit is this bit down the bottom here. So we're going to drop back, flatten in and reevaluate what we're going to do. Okay, I'm calling it and I'm going to say we're going to push on. But what I'm going to do before we do push on, I'm going to take the time to flatten this in really, really nice, maybe a couple of flattens. Shay is going to be washing out the bucket clean, so we're going to start with fresh gear just to give us a little bit extra time possibly. So we're not going to knock up with dirty water to put this on just in case something starts going wrong. Now, I'm going to take time to flatten this in really well with the large straight 20-inch trowel, because if I leave it flatter like this, it gives you a much bigger window of opportunity to get back onto it. We'll get it under control, get it quite flat. If I left it like this with all these ripples and stuff in there and these trail marks, letting that pick up and then come back and try and flatten that in later is going to be much more of an ordeal. Okay, so that's shortening, and we're not going to push on until we get this wall under control. Sometimes being a little bit slower wins the race. You know, you can't be going mad and just smashing it all on. So get this under control, get it all flattened in, it's all hanging. It's going to be a bit close to the edge, but I think we can do it quite comfortably. So yeah, although we're flattening that wall in, there's a bit of a fine line between getting across it at speed and getting it under control and then spending too much time on it and playing with the wall. One of the worst things, one of the most common mistakes a newcomer to plastering makes is to keep going over it and over it whilst it's wet and trying to flatten it in. And what you're doing, you're upsetting the granules in the plaster. You're putting more ripples in. I can't tell you enough. Just get it on, get it flat, get it looking better, leave it alone 5-10 minutes, come back and then have another go. You're much better off starting at the front of the wall, getting to the end, leave it alone, rather than spending 10 minutes on 1 square metre. That's all getting all put in. By the time you finish that and you get to the end of the wall's going off on you, and then it's all changing. Get across it at speed. You've got to be fast at plastering. Okay, so there we are, we're all on and every single wall is live. We've got everything first coated. So the first gauge, put this on, put these reveals on, and I can't remember exactly what we did. We filled out a couple of little bits and pieces that were deep. I was really glad actually that I did take the time to fill that a little bit out, because now I've put the first coat on this just now. It was still quite deep when I got back here because the 20-inch trowel reveals things like that. And you know, a perma shape, a curved trowel really ain't going to help you on a job like this. It's going to make it go with the flows. But yeah, the trowel showed me it was quite deep all the way around here, so I was really glad I did take the time just to dub that out a little bit with a little bit of the leftover gauge. So first bucket went on, it's this, and then Shay's half a ripply wall that we needed to sort out. Then we knocked up one with the dirty water from that and put this on. And you can see, look, from the textures and stuff, it's still a little bit wet in places. But where this lad hasn't gritted it very well, look, we've got some stress cracks coming through up here. I think I'm going to have to get some PVA on there. It's just not done it consistently enough. And this is my point with this grit stuff. It really isn't my favourite. I mean, maybe it's not so bad if you're going to be putting a thick coat of something on there anyway, like as if you're rendering or if you've got to float out an area. So your coat's going to be minimum of 10 mil. But for setting, I really don't think it helps you out that much. The walls are so textured and undulated and deep already, and all you're doing is putting more texture and undulation on it with the grit, especially when it's been done in such a clumsy way. And then, of course, because you've got more depth, the matte finish doesn't like it going on really, really depth, so it slumps and sags, and then it takes even more time to get around it. And of course, so they did it all. Then we bonded areas, okay? So now we've got like areas that are completely no suction at all to freshly bonded areas. So the idea of regulating all the suction is completely gone now. We've had to PVA it. And I can't do grit the bonding that day because you've got to wait 24 hours. So I would have had to have got it done yesterday when that bonding was still too wet to do, and we'll still be sitting here for 2 hours waiting for the bonding to set so that the blue grit would adhere to it properly. So for setting inside, nah, definitely not. I've used grit a few times and every time I've absolutely hated it. And this job is no exception to that. It's not worth the hassle, blue grit. Big fan, big thumbs down from me. I've got a tiny little bit of multi-finish left in the bucket and on my hook. I've had this off. Look, it was stress cracking so bad. The adhesion was completely compromised. Even if you went over that crack is going to keep coming back. It hasn't adhered. And this is where maybe just hasn't blue gritted it properly. It was just you know, areas completely far too much blue grit, areas with hardly any on it whatsoever. And we PVA'd this before we started as well. So I'm going to give this another PVA in those holes and I'm going to have to repair this. Okay, so this sort of like area here, this and this is kind of ready to lay down. This is a little bit behind. I'd say this isn't ready to lay down. So we're probably, what we're going to do is knock up maybe a bag or just under, see how far that gets us and get this area laid down, and hopefully by that time this area would have picked up a bit, and then we can do the same to that and continuously work our way around the room until it's finished. And in this case, I'd say quite often we're knocking back with dirty water, but this time to give us as much play time with this laying down coat as possible, because it's quite a large amount to lay down, we're knocking up with absolutely fresh, clean water. So this wall is laid down and flattened in. This wall is laid down and it's had one flatten and it's looking much better even just after one flatten. This wall is hanging back, it's still on the first coat level. Although most of that was bonded out, quite a lot of that bonding coat was thin. So I think what's happened when we put the coat of plaster on there, the first coat, the moisture from the first coat has gone into the depth of the bonding, but where the bonding is so thin, it's gone through and now that moisture has filled the bonding coat up and now it's hitting that blue grit and now it's just sitting there not going anywhere. And like I say, some bits are deeper than others, so we've got bits that have gone off and going off and some bits that are still hanging. So there's no point in going over that just yet. We've got a little bit of time on our hands. We're kind of in front of the set again, we're under control. But if you notice here as well, I think I did pick it up on the earlier in the video, that with that first coat we had all the pimples bleeding through from the texture that the blue grit was giving us. So we've given that first coat enough time to pick up so that when we slayed it down with the second coat, that texture has now disappeared and has been remedied already at this point. So look at this. This is where it hasn't been gritted properly. We didn't notice it. This is what stress cracking is. Now look, that adhesion has completely gone. Look, there's blue grit behind it. Look at it, it's just falling off. I'm gonna have to pull all this loose off again. It's all up here. Sometimes you might get away getting some PVA over it. If it's stress cracked a little bit but it's not actually coming off, then you might be able to get some PVA through the cracks in the area, but no, this is breached, look. Got to pull all this off. I'm gonna get some trusty old PVA in there, and then as soon as I've PVA'd it, I'm gonna whack some fresh gear over it and repair it. So we got, with this way that this has been blue gritted, areas like this that have got far too much suction on them, and then areas like this where it's still far too wet to lay down. It's just a complete pain as far as I'm concerned. It causes more problems than it solves, and I believe that word is a paradox. So just quickly analysing these bits of plaster that came off that corner where it just stress cracked. So there was the face of it, and this was the bit that was touching the wall, and I'm getting the feeling the blue grit has failed because it's gone over such a dry, porous, dusty area. The blue grit was too thick and it's not dried on it properly, because I've taken it off and I think there's hardly any blue grit on there, and as I've taken it off I think the blue grit has come away and gone into the plaster and come off with it. So let's have a look what's going on here. That's the first coat, you can see the colour of that. And that's the coat shades laying down with. See the colour of that? It's much darker. There's a difference in the batches here of this multi-finish. I'll tell you what, while I'm at it, I'm going to have a moan about these things as well. Look, all this polystyrene ball insulation. Somebody opens the door or something, or opens the window, and a gust of wind comes in there, or you accidentally touch some, they get all in your plaster and you have to pick them out individually. They can be in real pain and get got stuck on the end of the trowel, they get in your water bucket. So I'm going to go full Gordon Ramsay in a minute and shut this kitchen down. I've had enough. Right, at least it's a bit of a nicer day for it. Nice bit of blue sky, although the temperature is still quite chilly. Don't know what their plan is. They all seem to be looking at me. Okay, so we're all laid down and everything's under control. Shay's taken this wall off my hands, this wall and this wall are starting to final up a little bit. This half of the wall here is under control. So yeah, we're well in front of everything. Everything's nice and comfortable and we're back to a nice, calm environment. I'm switching from my Big 20 carbon steel and I'm switching over to, which ain't is standing on the trowel anyway, this old Rafina Flex 2. Had it for ages, it's very, very dirty. The reason I quite like these ones is they're a little bit stiffer and you've got some extra width on them as well, 5 inches wide. But they're a little bit stiffer than a lot of the other flexible trowels. So you can see with that flexi trowel, because it's stainless, not carbon steel, the way that the light's coming through, it's really closing that surface in. But at the moment, we're still getting quite a lot of this, what's called fat or sludge, if you like, which is coming out the wall. So that is not finished yet at all. It's when the wall starts to brown off a little bit and that residue coming out of it as you trowel up is reduced down to a very watery substance. Now, these flexi trowels, you have to be careful with them because they're too flexible basically. If you use them in conjunction with a really stiff trowel like the 20 like we do, and make sure you get a lot of the ripples and flattening in done prior to switching to one of these, then you should be okay with it. It closes the surface down and you might get away with troweling the wall up a little bit quicker than if you were staying with your carbon steel trowel. And your carbon steel trowel, it sometimes can be a bit rippy and not give you that lovely polished look that everybody thinks means it's a wonderful plastered wall. So yeah, you can't really use a flexible trowel from start to finish because they are just too flexible. But you've got to get the ripples out. And once you're happy you've got the ripples out, then you can switch to one. And in this case, I've just given it one pass with the wet brush as you saw. I'd let it pick up for a little bit, then I'm going to give it another one in exactly the same manner. And then that should be finished. The only other thing that sometimes flexible trowels are really good for, so as you noticed from earlier in the video, we were saying Shay plastered the bottom half of this wall. Because there was some ripples in the lower half and we didn't know if there's any units or stuff in it, so we decided to do it again. But it's feathered in all the way along here, see? Now, the flexible trowel is really good for feathering things in, like patches and stuff, because it is so forgiving. It will rock and roll and really, really feather that sort of sludgy stuff that's coming out the wall. It will really feather that out really nicely. So for patching up and stuff, sometimes they're really good, but do have to be careful of them because they will leave ripples in the wall if you're not too sure what you're doing with it. Seems I always talk too quickly when I start talking about the weather. I guess that's England for you. And the weather could be worse. We could be in Scotland. Well, according to the weather app, Scotland is 8 degrees but sunny. It's 11 here today, so the temperature has gone up. But next week it's going into the minuses apparently. So there we go, guys. That's the sort of finish which is quite easy to achieve when you switch to the stainless steel flexi trowels. Stainless steel is a shinier finish, mainly because it's a softer metal. That wall is done, and the reason I'm showing you this angle is the light just seems to be catching it just perfectly to show the sort of finish you can get. So we know this wall's done, it's just starting to brown off, and see, this is the sort of residue that we're getting out of that now. As you can see, it has been impossible to come out in flush with these old door frames, which are so dirty and got so much paint on them. And look, we're out quite a few millimeters in front. Now, what the builder will probably do on this is he will get a bit of doorstop, which is this here. It's got a draft excluder, but this is the doorstop. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets that, fits that doorstop on, so that this door frame then becomes powder, then a bit of plaster. And then when he gets his architrave, he's going to pin it flush on like that. So this gap will be taken up by the doorstop in the middle there. And then his architrave will come over to here. He'll fix on it. Then you'll have this gap at the back. And this is this little gap down the back that he'll probably fill with a bit of cork or something. If you're new to this channel, and you see, like, I've got a big long thumbnail, it's not because I'm a vampire, it's because I play the guitar and I tend to use finger styles. So the nails on this hand are they're much longer than the nails on the other hand. Although I did have an issue where my finger got shut in the door of a car where the wind blew it on there, and it's just sort of repairing itself now. So that's why. So if any of you guys out there are thinking about becoming a plasterer or have recently become one, it won't probably be too long before you discover that you can upset quite a lot of the other trades on the building site. If you don't want to upset them, you can do things like this. Along the bottoms, we've still got to clean the floor up. We're waiting for this wall to pick up. It needs its final trowel. But yeah, around the bottoms, just get your trowel, and because the end of the wall will curl out a little bit where you haven't been able to get down there. And if you trim the bottoms off, the carpenter will be happy that he'll be able to get his scouting board on there nicely. Trim out your boxes for the electrician, because obviously he'll be happy that he can get his box straight on there and he won't have to try and chisel all that out. Plumbers, obviously, they just don't want to get plaster inside their pipes or on their threads or anything. And things like door frames, as you saw earlier, get them cleaned off. All these little bits and pieces, clean off your beads, make sure your internals are all good. And basically, if you don't want to upset the painter, yeah, make sure your plastering's half decent in the first place. So all those little things at the end do make quite a bit of difference often, and the builder will notice that sort of stuff. So there we go, we are pretty much all done in here. Like I said in the previous video, that's going to become a door. They're going to knock that out at a later stage. But yeah, it's taken 2 days to sort this job out. If you want to have a look at what it was like when we started, then please do have a look at the playlist and check the previous episode, which is Plastering Over Blue Grit, I believe I called it. And I'll put the link up momentarily at the end of the video. So let's a quick look up there where that nasty angle was that needed straightening up. It's all remedied. That's the area where the stress cracks appeared, above the door there. And also down here we had a load of stress cracks from insufficient blue gritting. But yeah, 2 days. Have a look at the channel and I will catch you tomorrow, I'm going to assume, because we are going back to the Finch job. We have been summoned by Jasper the Emperor. Alright guys, have a good one. See you soon.